Yeah, so this is the Crimson Camper, and I've been painting on top of that. I do pieces on brown paper as well as the white. And the brown is kind of nice because you get to do white highlights, which you obviously can't do with the white paper. For traveling's sake, these Molotov markers have been really cool. They have a felt tip, and you basically pump the tip to get the paint to fill in here. And this one needs to be refilled, so I'll show you how that goes. This is kind of nice because usually I'm standing on the wheel well of my truck and my knees are having to lock, so this is great. But I usually start with kind of a lighter color and then work my way darker. I took some photographs from surfing in Bodega Bay the other day, so I'm going to do a piece dedicated to that. They have a bunch of cool kind of like stick teepees that everyone builds as wind shelters. So I'm going to do a piece like that. And everything's kind of coastal centric, so doing pieces anywhere I can park my van. And I'm starting with what I want to be in the foreground. Are you a painter as well?
No, my mother was.
Okay. So I'm starting with those stick structures, which is basically just driftwood that people are collecting, and then they stack up into teepees. So I studied industrial design in school, and I had to do a bunch of classes on form building and kind of thinking about form in 3 dimensions. So I kind of block things out that way and do kind of outlines of forms and then start thinking about how the form kind of is conveyed in different space. Starting with kind of the foreground and then working my way backwards.
How did you come to choose that acrylic?
Yeah, good question. So I've always liked acrylic because it's easier and less toxic to work with than oil. And I really have spent more time drawing and sketching with mostly ballpoint pen, but mostly just kind of more controllable methods, pencils, things that are a little bit finer in detail. So I was looking for a way to get a little bit more depth in my line drawings. So this is kind of a nice happy medium between drawing and painting. Acrylic dries quite a bit faster, so it's a lot more efficient when you're working with it, which is good if you're doing stuff on site and only have 45 minutes and the wind is blowing and you're in the middle of the sun. I'm also a graphic artist, so that's kind of partly my day job as well. I contract design work. So I've kind of developed a very graphic style as well, which the drawing with the paint markers actually kind of helps with. So these shelters are kind of fun. There's always kids playing around in these, so I'm going to have a little kid's feet hanging out here. Mm-hmm.
You're looking at the photograph? Do that right now?
The kids that I'm going to draw here are not in the photo, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to freehand this. But just for some reference, I'll use the photographs. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty loose with the first pass, meaning I don't really care if the form is perfect, because I'm going to do 2 or 3 layers on top of that.
Can you mix color with the paint?
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely can. I'll show you as we get darker.
That's the difference between magic marker and
Yeah, and that's why I kind of start lighter, because it's easier to layer if you start with a lighter color, and then you go back over the top. So I'm going to define a little bit of the beachscape here. big. Have you been to Bodega Bay? You been to Bodega Bay? Yeah, really cool. You've got these big, steep kind of cliffs that you walk down. There's these little dirt paths, kind of these little goat paths that you walk down to the surf. So I'll start with that. Start trying to kind of convey some depth here. So everything that's in the foreground is going to be quite a bit larger. So I've got some grasses down in here, which is just kind of light line work. But if I want to convey that this is closer to me, then I will make that grass kind of significantly bigger. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so that you get a different perspective and you start to understand that things are a little bit closer to you. And I don't want this to be the focus of the piece, so I'll still keep it kind of sketchy. Almost like if you're looking through a camera lens, you want to have your focus on the subject. But to get some perspective, you still need to have other forms in the foreground. But those forms will be blurry. So I'm just going to leave it a little bit sketchier. Doesn't need to necessarily be perfect. Allows you to be a little bit more expressive as well. Have more fun with your line work. And then I want a little path coming out of here. Make some cuts. You're welcome to stand as well if that helps. It's the same thing here. Because I want this path to look like it's coming towards me, I'll make the grasses bigger and then smaller as I get back. All right, now got some of the wash that's coming onto the beach. This will be all kind of the white water. Even though it's white, I'm still going to put that base layer of green. Because then when you start putting white over the top, you get kind of more depth in there. And then there's also some offshore kind of rocks, cool formations out in Bodega. So I'm going to put some in there. I'm going to let my pen do a lot of the work because these rocks are so much more angular. I want to use my whole arm to make these lines instead of my hand. It'll make a straighter line if you use more of your arm and your shoulder. Mm-hmm. And then I want to convey that there's quite a bit of movement and some water coming off of this thing. So I think about the water coming in here and how that reacts off that edge. Stylize it a bit, maybe exaggerate it, times 20.
What made you start this project?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in the west coast of the United States. I grew up in New Mexico. There's a lot of positive things happening in California in terms of sustainability, in terms of kind of a health-conscious future for humanity and for the planet alike. And there's also just a lot of creativity out here. So I was looking for kind of initially a place to live and work. But I'm a painter and I'm quite passionate about the environment and about surfing. So I decided to do a trip to kind of give back to some of my own impacts from traveling around the world the last couple of years, and help other people kind of realize what those impacts are in their own lives. So for instance, I fly quite a bit and I drive my car, and doing this trip, for example, has quite a bit of impact on the earth in terms of carbon dioxide and different greenhouse gases that are emitted because of my travels. So in terms of artwork, I wanted to give pieces away basically as gifts, as certifications for people offsetting their carbon footprint, which basically means that if you drive your car every day to work, you are emitting a certain amount of CO2. You know, if you have a specific diet that contains lots of beef or different types of meat, that also can play into the amount of CO2 that you produce. So there's different ways to measure your footprint. And then there's also companies and organizations that help you mitigate that footprint by systems that they've already set up and have in place. So they do renewable energy investing. They do reforestation projects and things like that that either remove the CO2 from the atmosphere or prevent additional CO2 from being emitted. And you can measure their impacts against how much you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And basically I'm taking the money from the prints that I'm selling from the end of the trip to donate to these causes and offset yours and whoever buys the prints their carbon footprint as well. So yeah, it's kind of just a cool way to give back and at the same time just enjoy my coastal trip. Yeah, man. So I've got kind of this close to blocked out with the green like I want. Put a little horizon line in there. I'm going to put some forms in the background just to kind of contain the piece as a whole, because I've got a lot of different layers going on, and this will kind of help frame it. So I'm going to put almost like a semicircle sunscape in here. I'm not going to care if I get it too exactly perfect, but just something to start building some forms there. Okay. These are pretty similar in value, so I can kind of use these interchangeably for this step, but I like starting with the brown. I always pump these a little bit to get it going. For the prints, I'll edit all these out, but for the originals, that'll be part of the process. That's kind of cool. So when I'm drawing with this second level, I'm always kind of considering light. In that first level, I'm not necessarily as concerned with where the light's hitting. I'm just building forms. I'm going to show you how these refill, because this needs a little refilling. So this piece comes off. That contains the felt tip. And then there's a secondary piece here that removes. You can see that pump mechanism in there. This gets a little messy, but I don't mind. And then these are your refill tubes. There's a couple different brands of these. I use Golden. I'm just used to that same acrylic from my other painting. And this is a liquid that you just squeeze into the tube here.
Acrylics being water soluble, they're pretty easy to clean up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you don't have to use any solvents to clean your brushes. You don't have to use any solvents to break it down to make it a little bit, more viscous. So it's just kind of a nicer process for me, at least.
Can you get a gradation? You can't really dilute the thing like the water.
You can, but I don't think they recommend it. I haven't tried too much. You can kind of administer how much you want to come out of this at one time. And if you just apply lighter pressure, then it won't put down as much ink. Trying to do kind of a balance between straight lines and organic lines. Will help you build your space a little bit better.
How long have you been doing this?
Painting and drawing pretty much my whole life. I took a couple of years of break in college to study industrial design and wasn't drawing quite as much. I was doing more industrial design sketching, which helped me with my form building and understanding of space, but not much painting. But I finally did find a medium that I really love.
Which was acrylic?
Yeah, acrylic and specifically these markers, because it allows me to be expressive still with kind of the nature of the paint, but then still kind of refined with just a pen.
Now, how does blending work with this? I mean, you got to go in when it's still wet, yeah?
Yes, it depends on the saturation of the colors, really. So this blue is quite saturated, and the actual paint itself is quite dense. So when you put that down, that kind of will trump the other colors, and then you can come over the top again with this. You kind of have to play around because each color is kind of different. But I'll show you on the interior here in a minute.
Yeah, 'cause I've never used those markers. It's really brilliant, actually. It's really cool. That's what I was trying to figure out. Because when you're painting acrylic, obviously, blending going when it's still wet.
Right.
I'm more of a scrubber than I am a painter.
Yeah.
I just like to scrub and blend.
Sure.
It looks more natural, but I'm just trying to figure out if that's possible with that particular.
Yeah, so you can. The problem with blending while it's still wet is that the felt will basically, yeah, it'll pick it up and absorb some of that color. So you run the chance of getting the felt tip muddy. You can exchange the felt tip. So if that's something that you really want to do or require in your work, you can certainly do that, and then just.
Dedicate a marker to blending.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on color value.
Yep. Let's see, I'll come back in now with blue over the top. Some of this part is still wet, but that's okay. And this blue is so strong and vibrant that it'll kind of just layer right over that brown line work that I just did. But then if I come back over the top, then that'll create that transparency. It's more of a transparency instead of a blend. Hi. I have kind of a hatching style, which tends to work better with these as well because they don't blend. So you're not necessarily getting gradients when you're trying to build up shading. So you can see that helped kind of pull that back a little bit. So I'm going to assume my light source is kind of coming in from this direction so that I can have a consistent darker edge on a lot of these forms on one side. That'll help it make it look a little bit more believable. My style is not very believable anyway, but it helps.
How much longer is that on this trip?
I'm heading down to LA. I'm probably going to do a little show in LA next week. But I've got maybe 4 to 5 days through San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara. Since I've got the brown out, I'm going to do the rest of my form building on the other sections as well. And also, since there's not a lot of blending or gradients that I do, I end up doing a lot of different kind of textures to signify that there's a different material or a different, type of plant or something happening. If I'm doing a lot of rocks, then I'll do a lot of kind of stippling just to signify that that's a different material. And it doesn't have to be much, just a couple of little dots will make that look completely different at a glance. Are you a painter as well? Oh, cool. Nice. Totally. Just smells better. So again, here this is kind of like foreground. I'm kind of considering this as like as I would in photography, just like kind of out of focus. So I'm just trying to be loose with it so that it doesn't become one of the main subject matters when you're looking at it. Sometimes you really got to pump it to get the new ink in there. Yeah, so you came in a little late, but I'm doing this project kind of all up the coast. Creating prints, and I'll start selling them online. I'm doing a Indiegogo campaign right now, which is a crowdfunding campaign like Kickstarter, just to kind of get some exposure and get some of the printing going. I'm going to create poster-sized prints. Pretty active on social media as well. I'm a photographer and I have a drone as well, so I do a lot of content creation from the spots that I'm drawing in, and it's not hard because this whole coast is pretty fabulous. So, hello. No, they'll be digital prints. What's up, man? Yeah, digital prints. I've got a buddy from school that does printing down in LA, so I'm going to meet up with him. But it'll be on kind of like nice heavy bound paper. And they'll kind of all be one-off. You're good. So this is Bodega Bay. I don't know if you've been out there, but it's a pretty cool spot. The waves were certainly not this big the other day when I was there. But we can dream. Absolutely. Yeah, an artistic license, this perspective is obviously a little bit warped, which I'm totally okay with. Because I wanted it to be kind of expressive, and I wanted this splashing form off this rock to be kind of exaggerated as well, so that kind of lends the rest of the piece to be able to be like that. Probably the surfing. Yeah, doing the live pieces on my camper is really fun. Um, it's kind of a tricky thing because the coast is always so windy. I've got a pretty good little system set up, but people do show quite a bit of intrigue when they see me up there. So I have had some really cool conversations and um, just kind of sharing stories from the West Coast. There's so many people out here doing this, and a lot of photographers and a lot of people that have their own kind of journeys set out. And I feel like it was a good experience to see how many people are actually traveling and how many people actually had no idea how to mitigate their footprint from this trip. They're all traveling and enjoy it and appreciate the nature that they've been enjoying. So it's cool to be able to expose the organizations that can help them, take care of that environment they are enjoying in the first place. So I feel like I've had a good impact and exposure, and just an amazing time.
So are you planning your next trip, or next trip where?
Yeah, so as soon as I get the printing all set up in LA, I'm actually moving out to the Virgin Islands again. I lived there a little bit last year, and I'll continue to do, not with the Crimson Camper obviously, but I will continue to do artwork and continue to work with these organizations to get more offsets happening in people's kind of daily routine. And then after that, I may get back in the camper and do it again.
Like a modern day travel for Charlie, right? John Steinbeck.
Yeah, I just need a dog now.
Yeah, there you go.
So a lot of these brown drawings are going to be a lot more difficult to make prints of. So these ones may be more of kind of a premium. You get the actual piece if you decide to buy one.
If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
Come to Wave Street Studios and grab a sticker. I've got a website under crimsoncamper.com. That'll redirect you to the Indiegogo campaign to buy prints, and I've got some t-shirts, organic t-shirts and things. Eventually I will have my own store through that page as well. But you can also see all my photography and a bunch of personal live streams from all my painting and stuff on my Instagram. Yeah. So I want this to drop back into the background. So I'm going to give it a really uniform texture, just so that it doesn't look like anything else. Some of this has so much movement going on that if I were to make this any more textural up here, it would just all kind of blend together. This will help this sit back. And it'd also help out dry the hell out of my markers.
Well, I'm guessing it's kind of new, you really can't take advantage of like atmospheric perspective or anything because it's so flat.
It's really graphic, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a medium preferred for kind of graffiti and kind of quick methods like that.
Who do you consider your biggest inspiration?
Who? What?
Who would you consider your biggest inspiration? You said graffiti, so.
Yeah, and when I say graffiti, I kind of mean a style more than anything. And I guess that's kind of more of just like a graphic treatment. So kind of stark line work and almost an influence of kind of a digital age. But there's an artist out of San Francisco. His name is Jeremy Fish. He definitely influenced me when I was growing up for sure. And you can see some similarities in our work because of the kind of graphic treatment, kind of a lack of shading. And then I continued to do advertising and branding work in a lot of vector kind of style. So that kind of pulled me into that as well. But Jeremy Fish is somebody to check out. He's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I also followed quite a bit of kind of like ski art, artwork that would go on the top coats of skis and things like that. And that's kind of reminiscent of what this whole trip is about too. You know, it's a surf trip, it's a painting trip, and it's about immersion in nature and kind of learning and appreciating places and environments. So I think a lot of that kind of style has kind of influenced me as well. So we'll get some white going here in a minute. I still haven't quite gotten the depth that I want, so I keep building all this up. So on some of this blue here too, it's a little bit too vibrant. So if I come back over the top with this brown, completely changes the color. And that's the transparency that I was talking about that's actually ends up being really nice. Gives you this deep kind of forest green color. Really sets it apart.
So you're primarily just in the primaries?
Sorry?
Are you mostly just the primaries and then you only got 4 markers?
Yeah. And I don't necessarily like kind of vibrant, like really vibrant red, even though my camper is kind of that color. So I like kind of these more earth tone options. I think they kind of speak more to the environments that I've been living in for a while. So. But it's kind of that same idea where you can take a couple of colors that are kind of on opposite sides of the spectrum and create kind of a range of depth and value from those. So this is why working on brown paper is cool. Because you get a much different quality when you can bring highlights in. If your markers cooperate. Just petting the bunny.
You never feel the marker quite full.
Sorry?
You never feel the marker full.
You can. It does have a tendency to, if you're not careful, it can bleed. I've had a couple of markers kind of just, if you press too long in one place, it'll just kind of start pooling. But you can, it's pretty easy to figure out once you kind of understand how the felt works. And replacing the tips is also fairly important, so that it doesn't have the dried paint inside of them and they flow how they need to. So I was still kind of form building a lot with all those colors. You can kind of start to get a little bit of movement and range with the white, like a little bit of spray happening. And that extends past the form, and you can keep it kind of light and wispy by just kind of doing dips, like stippling, or kind of just like let the line kind of filter out. Since everything else is so graphic, if you do like little line work like that, it starts to create much more detail and interest. I don't really want to downplay the fact that it's been windy as hell and kind of miserable sometimes out there. It's a great sound, huh? I was always intimidated by drawing water and fire, but you kind of just have to let your hand do all the talking. And then it's not so much of a problem.
Cutting edge television.
Wake up. I'm going to need that marker back, though, if you don't mind.
Should I just throw it back?
Yeah, if you want. Whatever you feel. Yeah. You can. Thank you. So smooth. Yeah, so those are all the pieces on the white paper, which have a nice quality too. Okay, buddy. Hmm? Yeah, I usually don't have that much time, so I'll just do a quick little sketch sometimes, or sometimes I'll just break straight into it. Yeah, I'm fairly confident in my ability to create the forms that I want to create, but sometimes I still need to work through a couple things, and sometimes you just kind of have to wing it, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Oh yeah, it just really makes the forms change, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'll do a couple highlights on this edge too. And you can come back and layer some of that brown on top of that, so it's not so brilliant. Because I want this to be a little bit whiter than just the highlights on.
If you ever think you overdid it, then you can use the dark color.
Yep, exactly. If you do too much, it can get muddy, so you do have to be conscious of how much you're putting on. But certainly.
something that you can make it into t-shirt or print?
No, my style kind of works that way. You know, a lot of it I can because there's enough negative space in here that I can edit all that out and make a transparent background. So it does work out that way often, but that's not really the intention. I guess in some ways for this project, it's kind of a nice benefit that way, so that I can actually create products that people will want to have, that will actually make a difference and make them, you know, offset their impact, because that really is the intention. You know, I would be drawing regardless if I was doing this project or not, because it's just kind of part of my my physical need now. It's, you know, I have this creative drive that I have to fulfill at some level, but to be able to channel that and give people an opportunity to create change in their own lives is kind of cool. So I think the style works pretty well for that. Do a little highlights on some of this grass.